Tell us about John Michael and his experience at the Goose last year.
So John Michael had melanoma, and he was first diagnosed in 2012. And so last year when he came, he knew already that he was leaving this life pretty soon. He had done some fairly aggressive therapies earlier in the year. And so when he was here with us last year, before he came, he had told me, if something happens, Mom, that's just the way it is. Don't feel bad about it, because he knew it could happen at any time.
And he was still very involved. Like, he pitched his own tent, he slung a hammock. One of the mornings he said he didn't even have the strength to get out of his hammock, but he was close to the stage, so he said, I just laid in my hammock and took it all in. He was able to hear the speaker.
We were just down past the stage in that center section, a good ways from the stage, but we could still hear it.
Talk about how JM was really trying to recalibrate faith and what Goose last year did for that.
So I live in Japan, and JM was 1 year old when I moved there, so it's been a long time. And I raised him really, knowing that when he was 18, he was going to leave for college and he might never live with me again. So when he was very young, I raised him very strictly in the faith that I knew at the time. Maybe I'm a little less rigid than I was then. I hope so. But so once he left for school, I know that he talked to me a little bit about his explorations. He started really with yoga, and then he kind of went deep with the spiritual side of yoga, and at one time was identifying as a Buddhist. When he came here last year, I think the picture we have of him, actually, he's wearing a Ganesh shirt, and he was wearing prayer beads and really using them every day, meditating, using incense. And I know that he's a very intense thinker and was searching for real truth for himself. So one of the last things that he asked me to do up in New York was there was a goddess coming through from India, and she gives hugs to people. And she's been coming to the States for 30 years, and everywhere she goes, there's like the Colosseum full of people who just want to get a hug. And so I was like, sure, I'll go get a hug from a goddess for you. So we went, and somehow I think maybe him coming to Wild Goose was sort of his like, well, Mom went to the goddess with me, so I'll go to the Goose with her. It was, I think that was kind of the feeling he had coming into it, but it was also a chance for him to see his aunt, see Lynelle again. And that was the last time you saw him, wasn't it?
That was the last time I saw him.
Yeah.
He had to leave early. He left on Saturday, and it was interesting because as he was leaving, he was pulling his suitcase behind him, and he had on his hat that he had been wearing regularly, and I think he had his scarf around him that he was always wearing. And he was walking up the dirt road, and there were people drumming, and it was like they were drumming him out, and it was just like, look, yeah.
You really saw it at that moment, didn't you?
Yeah, I really did. I was behind him. I wasn't walking right beside him. I was behind him. And I was watching him walk alone with the drums.
Yeah.
It was actually really beautiful. It was like he was being sent on his next journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So, as it is between sons and mothers, he didn't tell me what was going on. He talked more with you that weekend. I was very distracted by other things, trying to take care of him, trying to make sure things were all right.
Yeah.
But we did wisdom camp together, and at the end of wisdom camp, they did the Eucharist, and he's very present with people. He's kind of a charismatic person. He smiles really big, and so the way that they moved the chairs, and it was kind of an open space, and people lined up and were going up to the front to get their bread and dip it in the wine and eat it and stand in a circle and kind of have a lovely fuzzy moment, And he was greeting everyone as they got into line, and he was kind of always standing at the end of the line, but I could tell he was holding back for some reason, like making a decision whether to participate or not. But he did. And so he was the very last person in line, and he went up, and everyone else had dipped their bread in the wine, in the chalice. And so he took his bread and he just ate it, and then he just reached out for the chalice and he just took it and he drank the whole thing. There was this feeling of shock when he took it because nobody was doing that. But he did. He grabbed, he took the whole thing, and was it Aline that was holding it?
I think so.
And she was
Yeah.
kind of like this kind of little look that she had. Is this okay? Kind of thing. But he took it, and he was really looking at us in the eyes as he drank it with this joy and this like acceptance of what life had dealt him. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
reading into it a little bit. I didn't know that then, but he really he drained the cup, and there was a beautiful sense of something. Yeah.
And you said later he told friends.
Yeah, I didn't
And
know. And I
what,
got
what did
back-
he tell them?
2 or 3 of his friends and his fiance said, "Oh, I'm so glad you took him to the Wild Goose. That was really important." And he seemed to say something that indicated that he had returned to his identity as a Christian, and he was at peace with that. That he had searched for a lot of things, but that this
He had
really was
found
who he was.
His roots, his faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
And y'all came this year as a pilgrimage in
Yeah.
many ways, but you're not alone. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we kind of invited all of his friends to come because, hey, that's what you do. And they didn't, but we're here, and we have another sister here with her family. And it really is a pilgrimage. We walked back down to the site where he took that last communion. I felt like the dust of the ground was speaking to me, like he had touched this dust, and this was a moment, something really important happened here. And it was kind of out of the blue for me yesterday when I went down there, but it really,
It really affected. Yeah.
and we met the woman so they do this thing called relational yoga at Wisdom Camp. And the woman that he interacted with there was here again this year. And so there was a sense of reunion and connection. Yeah.
He got a tattoo. His first tattoo while he was here was of the Wild Goose, and that was on the day that he left.
On the day he left, right?
The day that he
Yeah.
left.
It's the last thing he did before he got drummed out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That and take that picture with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This place, Hot Springs itself, the beauty that God has created here, and the Wild Goose, the event that's happening here, are kind of intertwined inside me in a way that I don't know quite how to separate one from the other. But it has become a place where I watched my son find an answer that he didn't even need to explain to me because he thought it was so obvious. And I think that, that whatever he found, he was really at peace when he passed. Our other sister who's here told us last night that one of the last conversations they had, she was asking him about his soul, and he said, "No, that's fine. Right now it's a body event." It's a body event. So he was at peace after he left here, and it really showed in everything that he did after this. He went camping out in Montana and Wyoming with some friends. He gathered up, 10 or 12 of his friends from college together. And
To watch the eclipse. Yeah.
so he was actually out in Wyoming at ground zero for the eclipse. And he told all of them about what had happened. Again, I just heard stories from them. And he spent, 20, 30 minutes with each one of them before he left, just saying goodbye and talking through the hard things that they had as a friend. And so he was
And then
very connected.
It was just, 2 days later, 3 days later that he died.
It also occurs to me hearing you speak that, and what you described at Wisdom Camp was kind of a coming home, as it were, spiritually, but also kind of a healing moment in terms of his soul, as you said. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, with him having done so much searching for truth in other traditions, truth in other religions, in other cultures, and, growing up in Japan, certainly there were a lot of other cultures. He went to an international school. He saw a lot of people with different kinds of faith all of his life. So that search seems to me like a natural thing that he needed to do. And to come to someplace like Wild Goose where there's an acknowledgement of everything and an allowance for you to be one thing. So I think that maybe that's to be in an exclusive, this is the only way setting was not a place that he could go to anymore. And I mean, I don't know. I'll ask him in heaven, where I'm totally speculating. But this is what I see also at the Goose, is that we have beautiful representations of people from all different ways of life and all different religions, all different cultures, who are finding something in common and trying to allow us to be individuals in our own culture and yet find a connection with others. So I think that was a perfect storm for him. That was exactly the kind of chaos that he needed to be in order to find who he was.
I think, like as sojourners on this earth, when it comes to religions, they're so often divided. We don't travel together with them. And so there often feels like a need to pick one or the other right away, so that we have a community rather than being able to work it out on our own and to find out what it is that we believe. And obviously, what we believe, we always think we're right, and that's just the way it is. But this is a beautiful place where people can come together with their beliefs and still have conversation and still be able to work things out with a larger community of people that don't always believe exactly the way that you do. And I think that a lot of that maybe enabled him to bring it back to him, like not saying I have to be here or here or here or here, but who am I in the middle of all of this? And so that's, like she said, we're speculating because we don't really know exactly what the process was, but I feel that here.
I do too.
Yeah.